Hello, everyone. Hi. How are we doing? Good. Is this all of yours like first open book event this festival, or have you already been at other ones? First one. Okay, so you're just getting started. Well, we're very happy to see so many poetry lovers pitch up on a Friday at lunch hour. It's obviously more important to eat words than food. Thanks for being here. And also just for this beautiful panel of poets. I'm going to just quickly introduce them to you guys. Firstly, to my left, we have Dr. Athambile Masola. She received a PhD from Rhodes University. A dissertation is in exploration of black women's life writing with a particular focus on Noni Jabavu and Sisonke Msimang's memoirs. Her primary research focuses on black women's life writing and historiography. She's especially interested in erasure and the ways in which multiple forms of reading a variety of texts can inform archival research. Her debut poetry collection, Ilifa, was published in 2021 at Uhlanga and won the NIHSS Prize for Poetry. Can we welcome Dr. Masola?
I thought you were just going to be like one by one.
No. Then next to Athambile is Siphokazi Jonas. She's a critically acclaimed producer, writer, poet, and performer. I have an abridged version of the bio, okay, because there was a lot. With a strong national footprint and growing international presence, she holds an MA in English Lit from the University of Cape Town. She's been a featured performer at festivals all over the country and internationally, and she's making waves wherever she goes, as I think a lot of you guys might know, especially in the poetry, theatre, and film worlds. And her collection, Weeping Becomes a River, is her first collection of poetry and won the Book Lounge Book of the Year, amongst other accolades. Welcome, Siphokazi. And then lastly, but certainly not least, we have Ryan Pedro there on the far end. His debut poetry collection, Pink Ceramic Oinkies, was awarded the Ingrid Jonker Prize, as well as the UJ Debut Prize. And his second collection, Prince, just appeared at Kwela. There he has it. Beautifully edited and published. And since then, he has served on the judging panel for both the UJ Prizes and Kijknet Rapport Prizes. He works as a scriptwriter on various television shows and lives in Gordons Bay with his wife and their 2 dogs. Oh no, yes, 2 dogs. Okay. Wonderful. Okay, today we're talking about trauma. We love to talk about trauma, don't we? But I mean, it's necessary, obviously. And I want to kind of kickstart the conversation to hear like how you see yourself in relation to trauma and your work. Do you see yourself as giving voice to trauma, and how does that process work for you? In short, how do the personal and political meet on your tongue?
You're going to have to say who must go first.
Whoever feels most traumatized, I guess.
Well.
Okay, Ryan.
No, I think I've spent my whole life trying to write myself away from said trauma, or trying to move away from said trauma in my personal life. But because we do what we do, you need to stay true to yourself when you are creating art or producing art. I don't really like the word creating art, but producing it. So the personal and the political for me is one and the same thing, because if you inhabit a body that is so often policed, that's a site for trauma historically, then you can't really shy away from writing into that space. You need to try and figure it out, wrestle with it, put it away for like a month or 6, and then go back to it. And then it becomes a poem, and then it becomes a book. And then we end up here, trying to figure it out once more.
Yeah, and you guys?
Yeah. Hello, everyone. This is so cool. So lovely to see a room full of poetry lovers with my faves. Yeah, I think pretty much to what Ryan has spoken to, but the first thought that came to mind was this question of epistemicide, like the trauma of like something has been withheld from you, something that should have been, so in my case, language. I write in isiXhosa, and it doesn't come from a very easy place, because I have a memory of, I was 11 years old in a classroom, and I was told by a teacher not to speak Xhosa. So that's a visceral thing where you're like, wait, what? How? I'm 11 years old. I mean, and the violence then of being in that particular school, we were laughing recently, I just went back to my 20-year reunion to that same school, and
Triumphantly, my time.
Well, it was a good one. I even wrote them a Substack, because I'm like, gosh, after, I know.
They can at least get a Substack.
But it was finally feeling like, because 10 years ago, when I went back for my tenure, it still felt difficult, and then there was this huge fallout around Black Lives Matter, and all the kind of previously white schools and private schools were all in the media, and my school was caught up in that. And I blasted them on national TV for all that violence and them claiming they value Black lives. And we're like, which lives? You didn't value our lives. How are you out here writing statements about Black Lives Matter when there's like a trail of black children that you traumatized for however many years? So it often feels like a very self-indulgent kind of trauma of having been a privileged child in these schools, and then you walk out with this accent, and then you're trying to explain to people how traumatic it was for you to earn this accent. So, I mean, there are many traumas, but that's the one that came to mind.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting how sometimes people seem to kind of, compare traumas, or like, my trauma was worse than yours, or I deserve more to be traumatized because of this and that, right? Rather than, I don't know.
Olympics.
Yeah, trauma Olympics or
Trauma
something like that.
Olympics.
And how do we like, Siphokazi, do you want to maybe speak to the question before I kind of...
Sure, since I'm here.
Yeah.
I don't actually, as we were talking about, I don't write about trauma, I write about people.
Okay.
And then who sometimes happen to be traumatized.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's usually, and sometimes place as well, but the trauma it's like, I get on the page, oh, okay, there's trauma here. But it's always about people, because then it allows us to exist within a fuller spectrum of trauma, in contextualized with joy, with all of these other things. So, yeah, that's probably my approach.
Yeah, and what I'm wondering about is kind of that danger of, because writing about trauma doesn't automatically lead to healing, right? And I'm interested in that for you guys. How has that process been? Do you feel like there's been some kind of healing, and how do you guide that process when you go writing and when you delve into yourselves or into characters that you've created, in other genres or whatever? How do you guard that process of excavation so that it doesn't just become a rewounding, but it actually leads to some kind of resolution, some kind of healing, some kind of moving beyond what is? Or you don't want to move beyond what is. Like, how do you feel about that?
Sorry, I feel so rude. Moleni, hello? Moleni? All right, okay. Just want to make sure. So, okay. I'm just actually thinking about this. For me, it's not about healing. There's very little healing, I think, for me in the excavation process, except a kind of... I try not to write about things I haven't processed to a certain degree. So I think there's personal processing. Sometimes there is a processing that happens in the writing, which does not always lead to a poem that will go into the world. But I found, especially in the process of writing a larger body of work or compiling a larger body of work, and I said this a year ago, when I was like, okay, I need therapy. The healing is not here, Betuna. If you're going to get this book, get the book. But if you're looking for healing...
Supplement it with sessions.
With therapy, which is very expensive.
More expensive than a book, yeah.
Oh, yeah. So I found that sometimes the writing is just like a can opener, and it's not the thing. And even the end of it, I may feel some kind of way. Also, the way in which we grow and transform shifts how we even relate to our work, shifts how we relate to the pain point in our lives. So it's very difficult to just say, all right, writing leads to healing. I would love it if it was that easy. Yeah. But for me, it's almost saying, where is the wounding? Where, it's bringing that
it's like
stuff
identifying
up.
it more than curing it.
Yes. I think there's something, sometimes I find more healing, although do we ever heal? Not to lead into like a existential crisis here. And, do we heal? And what is that? Because sometimes you think you've healed in a certain area and then something happens that triggers you. You're like, I'm actually not okay. So for me, the work, actually this kind of gathering and connection that says, oh wait, the thing that I think is mine alone is actually ours in different ways. And for me, there's that point of like, okay, there's a loosening and untensing that happens. Sometimes it has to do with shame around trauma, that I think when we are able to write things and give them voice, and that's why I'm like, I don't just write about the trauma, it's about the people. When you give voice to that, it takes the sting out of the shame, I believe. And so there's actually a little more of the healing process in the sharing and connecting as a result of what has been written.
Yeah. What do you guys feel about this question?
I agree with that fully. It would be really tough to revisit your work if you write about all of the stuff that has wounded you so deeply. It is easier to see your writing, and poetry especially. It's a way, the way the language presents itself to you is never the thing itself. It's always trying to build safety nets around it, trying to build walls around it, trying to build bridges towards it, trying to build roads away from it when it gets a bit too much. So poetry affords you that opportunity to not engage with that thing in a way that is going to harm you and scar you even further. It's more like, here's the page, let's try and put the thing on there, but let's try and figure it out from a different angle. Let's try and get to it at a different angle so that it doesn't ruin it for you. Writing, you want it to be something that you can return to, especially when you're compiling a large body of work. You want to go back to it. So if you just bleed onto a page every time you go write, it's not going to be a very pleasurable experience. You really need to be clever about how you go about it.
I mean, I'll add to that. I mean, there's different forms of writing, right? Like there's the one, as you say, there's stuff that no one will ever see. Even I don't go back to it. I technically bleed on the page and I don't even go back to clean up the mess.
Once was enough.
And I think that's a different kind of writing that is necessary for healing. But I think in relation to the writing, something about like some of the poems that I've written and have shared of kind of like bursting the shame bubble. And then hearing other people being like, oh, snap. And then you're like, oh, I'm in community with this like little shame that I wrote about. There's one poem in particular that I have. And the minute I started hearing other people relate to it, and I think I heard somebody else read it, and I was like, oh, this is not just my problem. So I think that's the beauty of the poetry that we then do get to share, that there's the healing and the conversation with people afterwards with what it does in the world. But then, obviously, in order to get there, you have to hopefully do some of the behind-the-scenes stuff.
Yeah, and it seems like what you guys are saying is that the medicine is often more like in the sharing and in the communion and in that recognition rather than the actual process of
it's kind of like
creating.
Crowdsourcing your healing. it's putting it out there,
right?
and like opportunities like this,
Yeah.
smaller readings, even gathering with friends when you speak about your writing is. So what do you think about that thing I wrote? It's trying to crowdsource it.
Also, if I can add, actually, I think there's something about that pesky thing called craft that creates that scaffolding and distance, because once you have to edit and have someone be like, okay, no, okay, I'm so sorry this happened to you. Now let's talk about this rhyme scheme here. It creates a kind of a distance. You become a witness, if it is about you, because not every, you become a witness even yourself to the thing that you've written about. So I found that time, editing, crafting, distance, lens, because you also have to make it beautiful. Like it's ouch, but beautiful to people, and maybe that's where fluency and trauma is because it never lands on the page the way someone may read it once it's been published.
Yes.
So when there are things that are cut, there are things that are added. All of that entire process for me is also what protects you as the writer. to a certain degree, protects the reader. And I think for me, that's also part of the not re-traumatizing.
Yeah.
Because once you have someone else come in and be like,
They're like,
listen. Yeah.
Yeah, cool. So those safeguards seem to kind of happen in that editing process and in that, once you've put it out there to really rework it. Okay, now I want to kind of shift the conversation to a bit towards language more explicitly. You already mentioned some of your experiences, right? And I'm sure, we've all had those moments where you get policed because of the way that you speak, right? Or present yourself through language. And so I'm interested, as poets, you all made a conscious decision to publish in a specific language, right? You're publishing in Xhosa, you're publishing in Kaaps, you're publishing predominantly in English, but also with some spices, right? And so how did that decision come about? And then do you think that, have they paid off? Like, was that the right decision for you to be writing in that language? Or is it a decision even for you? Does it just come in a specific language? So just if you can maybe speak to that.
The thing about poetry is that it just comes. It happens. You have no control over it. And I think that was the beauty of what then became Ilifa, because for a long time these were just my poems. It was me just experimenting. So I never set out to be an isiXhosa writer or poet. I studied isiXhosa, I studied literature in English, but it was never like, when the book first came out, I kept saying to people, like, if you had told my 21-year-old self that her first book would be a collection of poetry in isiXhosa, she would have laughed at you. Like, or even my 7-year-old self. Those people would be like, ha ha, joke's on you, but now joke's on me. And so that's been the beauty of it. And I think because the language it kind of just refused to leave me, because there was an active process of so there's like something they call like extractive bilingualism, where in order for bilingualism to be established or for you to learn a new language, they have to remove another language. That was actually a very systemic process. And anyone who grew up speaking another language and went to a particular system will talk about that. But there's the beauty of the language. One, I mean, it's always quite hilarious, not hilarious, but beautiful that we call it the mother tongue. My mother refused to not speak to me in isiXhosa. There were stages where I only spoke in English and she would actively only speak to me in isiXhosa. We went to a Xhosa church, and there's also just that beauty of, like, my early memories of poetry are the mothers praying in the church. It's so poetic. And the hymns that we would sing, and Black Church became the place where I kind of hear really rigorous sermons with like really beautiful language that I won't hear for the rest of the week. So the kind of the language staying in that way, in a kind of this very spiritual space, but also kind of constantly calling me back to something. And also I was grateful that that's how the poetry emerged, that it comes in isiXhosa. So I don't write in English, then translate into isiXhosa. The poems arrive as they are, and it's something that I find difficult to explain, even for myself. So yeah, it wasn't like, I'm gonna write in isiXhosa now. No.
Yeah. And just before we move on, like, how is your work been received? Because I mean, there's not a lot of Xhosa poetry collections that get published yearly, right? So how has that response been, and would you publish again in Xhosa?
Well, I got an award, which was always nice.
Yes.
So that was amazing, and there were reviews, and the thing about isiXhosa poetry, I mean, there's a copy I bought at Clark's book, and I can see the cover, but I can't remember. It's in isiXhosa. I can't remember. It's like a collection of different authors. It's not one author, and that's very contemporary. I think what the reception has taught me is this kind of taken for granted thing about circulation. So even though it was my first book, I'd already been a blogger, I'm in a university context, I already have a community of writers, and so people latch onto my work in a particular way, whereas, I forget her first name, Sis Fikiswa Maqashela has been writing novels forever. Siphokazi Jonas has been writing novels forever, but her work doesn't circulate in the same way as me. She's of a different generation. She publishes with quite a prominent publisher that's actually been one of the prominent novel publishing houses, Bard Publishers. That's published her, Prof. Ngedile Saule, and a few others. So it's this weird thing, and I know this because I'm constantly searching for incwadi zesiXhosa, but they don't circulate in the same way. So that's what the reception taught me. It's like, oh, I have to really think about what is it. And my book also came out with Twinzikazi Mbungwana, who was kind of well known in the spoken word space. Her book is Unamwena. So we're also pairing up. So we're also then sharing her circulation with my circulation and kind of speaking to each other. We launched at the same time, which was really important for us because it was a kind of a statement also about the different kinds of poetry that we're doing. Because when you have it's all languages, but when you have such a tradition of poetry, which is bonga and bongi and yombongi, hey, I'm not going to here. But and that's like a very specific thing that was in my head about oh my gosh, what are people going to say? Are people even going to call this poetry? And then to see that there are people who understand that Twinzikazi and I are doing very different things with the same language was probably the biggest learning for me.
Yeah. What about you guys?
For me, I've always had a really complex relationship with language because of that exact thing. My parents pulled us out of the ghetto at a really young age, and then they took us to the suburbs, and we were cops. And then you're in this predominantly white space, and then you get teased for the way you speak. So you always have to exist in this void where everything is uncertain, your language is uncertain, and therefore your culture is uncertain, and therefore your identity is uncertain. So then you need to start filling that void. And that's why the poetry came out the way it did. It's writing back towards corpse, but it's writing towards something else as well. And then you kind of need to find stuff wherever you can find it, and that's why you use corpse, Peter, in your question. But for me, it's that, yes, very much so. But it's also the lexicon of underground counterculture movements like rap, like skateboarding, graffiti. All of that stuff is why the book looks the way it does, why it sounds the way it does. It has the lexical structure of corpse, but it also has the standard is just right there, and the English is just right there, and the slang is just right there, and the references to popular culture. It's a really fun and it's a really texture-rich book, but it often alienates a lot of people. So that's. It's always fun encountering people who have read the book, the new one especially, because the first one is more accessible, but Prince, I was just like, I'm going to write the book that I want to read, the book that I understand, the book that's fun for me. And that's why the language is the way it is. Corpse, yes, but also all of those other things.
Yeah.
All in an effort to try and write myself back towards something that I've kind of remember. Yeah. And write myself into a space where I feel more comfortable speaking the way I speak.
It's like writing a language where you can feel at home in.
Exactly.
Just two things on my end, adding to what's already been shared. Something that happened now as Atta was speaking, where she was speaking about going to a Xhosa church and hearing prayers in isiXhosa. Have
you even praised God? If you don't use those words, God did not hear you.
For that. And so, so there's a kind of thing that happened between the two of us in our shared history and sort of cultural reference that this book became that, allowing for that to happen, that this can happen on the page. If you get it, you get it. If you don't, you don't. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So the use of language, there's a lot of work that Vangi and I did, but the use of language was making that possible, that, some people will not get it, and that will mean something. Some are willing to do the work because they don't get it. Yeah. And then others are just like, yes.
I know this.
So it's using the language in the way that I did in this book was that. And then I know we're going to read later, but I just want to read a poem to answer your question.
Yes.
A short poem.
Please, I think
And
we're going
then-
to jump into the poems anyway right now.
Okay.
So will you lead us?
All right, sure. So, so I'm going to say, it's ginger. I'll just say that, and then that's how I've written, or the presence of his Xhosa in this way. Straining cloth. After crucifying ubuXhosa bam, wounds dressed in school uniform, tongue bound for 6 hours to avoid detection and detention, then migrating home by bus to hydrate with ginger beer. I wish I'd asked the ground ginger dredged through a straining cloth how it felt to surrender the flavor of its body to a drink, then be discarded. Wars are won and lost with bodies. In former white schools, we were Thonia's bones securing victory for Athens, breaking the architect of apartheid's curse of Bantu education in exchange for new accents to finesse our way into white economy. Had I foreseen my excavation, a heap of ex-miners and domestic workers eroded to silicosis and arthritis, black employees code-switching daily, wounds dressed in traditional costume on Heritage Day, I would have been less annoyed by traces of ginger escaping a straining cloth to lurk at the bottom of my glass and in my throat. And it's been putting those traces together and giving them prominence in my quenching.
In your thirst also, right?
Stunning.
Can we clap? I wonder if either of you want to respond or just add with a poem, to just kind of get the reading going a bit.
I'll add a conversation to that, I think. Maybe I'll come back to the other one. This one's called Coconut. Exactly. Khawuzithuthe. Ndithini? Zithuthe. I don't know what that means. Awukwazi ukuzithutha. I don't know what that means. Iziduko zakho zitheni? Zithini? Oh, is that what you mean? Well, my dad only gave me 5. Said I wouldn't remember zonke. Zithini ke? Mamgcina, nokwindla, xhamela, ncancashe. Forgot the last one. Elushe? Maybe.
Okay, then I'm also going to add to the pot. I have these poems in my book where I wrote it in the form of scripts. I have this speaker that dips in and out in the collection. His name is Prince, and it's also the title of the book. So I'm going to read one of his little soliloquies. Wie is ek? Control B the boldest. Degree of 2 the coldest, as in way too fucking clever. Born a stone's throw about the margins van history. My birthright, die way with words. Wat soos crown jewels nie comfortably wil sit op my koppie. Anoint me, Mr. Most Young Kings, Mr. The Crown ain't worth much, sidewalk preacher, half-truth speaker, aka the perfect historian, aka the perfect custodian van die language, die literature. Ek is Ryan the Machine, ek is Prince the Creator, wie is ek? I might be the realest character ever.
Shall we have some more poems, guys? Who wants to?
Okay, I was thinking of, because we spoke about it, Omama Bomthandazo, the woman that we heard praying in our youth. So I wrote a poem, Omama Bomthandazo. And I don't think I've actually ever read this out loud. And it was in response to I was part of a book project called Kauve, which was a collection of all the, most of the pictures from the 1956 march. And there was this beautiful image captured of omama wearing impahla zomthandazo, uniform, the church regalia. You've seen them in red and white, blue and white, black and white. We know exactly what's happening. I see someone's like, I'm one of them. And it was just such a powerful image because, and my sister, I think, wrote something, or we were chatting about it around the time, or she may have written about how until that image, or we were just reflecting how depoliticized sometimes not depoliticized, maybe despiritualized the 1956 march can be, that it's only a political thing. But when you see the images of Omama had actually gone there, for them it was spiritual warfare, in a sense, those who know. And so, I wanted to kind of pay tribute to that. And so it's in 2 languages. And the reason why I've never read it out loud is because I feel like I'm not as strong in the other language anymore. I used to be, but so bear with me. And it kind of feels weird to repeat a prayer, but I will treat it as such. Are rapelang, modimo ntate, modimo mora, modimo moya, o halalelang. Ntate runa ya mahodimong, o murena wa marena. Wena unkulunkulu osithandayo. Namhlanje siza kuwe sicela uvikele ubumnyama xa sibheka ePitoli. Sithandazela izingane zethu, imindeni yethu ngale mini ebaluleke kangaka. Hamba nathi njengoba wahamba namaSirayeli entlango. Lo msebenzi wokubhukuqa lo mbuso kumsebenzi esiuthwaliswe nguwe moyo oyingcwele. Dira hona diqalane ke hloheletswe ke wena le matla le kganya ka ho sa feleng. Amen.
Amen.
Sure, okay. We're still good? We're all still together in it. Wonderful. There's a weird thing that happens when you travel with a book, which I'm learning, is that there are some poems that you actually don't read, maybe because of the ways in which it gets framed, and you sort of pick these poems and they make the most impact. So I'm going to read one that I also haven't read a lot, but I have read sometimes, and it's called A Witch by Any Other Name. Sounds like someone, okay. It would be wrong if fat white people overseas get slim thanks to us, while our children go hungry and uneducated. Magdalena Kasi. Uwalumkele amagqwirha. Throw hair trimmings into the street and they will bewitch you. Sissy doesn't say this loudly enough for mother to chastise her. Singamaqoboka. Fear sprouts, imagining a witch woman with face like zinc extracting my name from my follicles over a 3-legged pot. British witches, officials, beheaded Uhinzaka Kawuta, stole his ears and teeth as souvenirs. Traditional healers agree, umbuso onikela ngamalungu emizimba eyezeni unqula ebingelelweni wobugqwirha. In the Kalahari, a San Gaikha points out plants conserved by scientists. He can no longer gather and use them as his ancestors taught, without going to jail. Walumkele amagqwirha, bring ancient knowledge to light, and they will bewitch you. The Council for Scientific and Industrial Research and 2 foreign pharmaceuticals are Macbeth's 3 hags in lab coats and suits, attempting to divine weight loss properties out of Hoodia and patent it for commercial gain. Science. Jakalashe ndophule ndiyatsha. Sisi saying, refuse further dismemberment.
Eka. Okay, yeah. I'm just going to read mine without any context. As, it's one of those. It's all in there. A Marlo Stanfield type. It's a character from The Wire. For die wat nog The Wire gekyk het, he is, yeah, villain, bad guy. Ek verstaan jou need for a backstory. Incomprehensible, my gesig, my features, kin to Bollywoods, Daniel Dumoulin. Unfathomable, my body, my skin. So dark and so vast as a dead galaxy. So sing about me, I'm dying of thirst. Inconceivable hoe ek move deur die war-torn streets, soos Prodigy, deur die eerste verse van Shook One's Part 2. Calm and callous op poverty oor murder. Maar niemand hou van 'n open-ended nigger nie. Niemand hou van 'n nigger as 'n metafoor nie. As jy my vir die eerste keer op die sypaadjie kom meet, te peek out of thin air. As ek vir jou sê, do it or don't, I got some place to be, wil jy te worry. Sy soek my story. Een met 'n kleur begin, 'n tense middel, en 'n slot wat sluit so stronkhekke, met 'n klang. Sy soek die psychology, die science, die history. Daarom sal my name is my name ook nie suffice. I wasn't made to play the sun nog minder. Want sy soek my ice cold ma, sy soek my poesdronk pa. Sy soek my in a field, bloody left for dead, met my broek nog om my enkels. Sy soek die tormented screams vanaf die gallows, die wailing vanaf die whipping posts, wat steeds deur my stamboom echo. Sy weet, I like good shit. Van sy hou nie van 'n complex nigger nie. Sy soek net 'n nigger met 'n complex.
Ja. Guys, I prepared way too many questions. I was so excited to like really dig
You were very
into.
ambitious.
Yeah, no, you
I
sent a
saw your
scroll.
email. It's like,
And this was even like after I cut.
I slayed.
Yeah, no, I mean, I was moved by your poetry, and I dug in, and I was like, yeah, let's do it. And now, you know, the hour's almost done. But I do want to just touch on each of your collections just a little bit. So let me just see what, I'm going to start with Ryan. One of the like early quotes in your collection has to do with posture and positioning, right? And kind of how you use that. And I'm interested in like how Ryan the poet uses the language of script writing to create this kind of posture, or these characters that are somehow versions of you or extensions of you. So I'm interested in like how the language of script writing enables that creation of alternate eyes in your collection.
Okay. I'll save the script of it all for my last portion of answering that question. The posturing is distance. It creates distance between all the antagonistic forces in the spaces that I exist in, the cultural, the social, and especially the literary spaces. So what posturing allows me to do is quickly dip into a liminal space where nothing is certain, where I can negotiate with myself about what my identity is going to be, about what my language needs to be like, about what my cultural identity is going to be, what I'm going to look like. Before I enter these spaces, I negotiate before myself, before I go negotiate in that set space. So the film and the characters is that exact thing, because the way my work is often engaged with, and many of my contemporaries' work is also engaged with, is you can see it in the language that it's it's not safe. It doesn't feel safe. It feels like I said, antagonistic. So what one needs to do then is So it's really hard for me to speak about this because, see, that's where the trauma of it all comes in. You need to enter these spaces fortified. And I need to write myself away from that space by using the thing that takes me into the space. So it's a real complex thing. So you kind of need to create a character before you enter the space, and then when you get out, it's just like, it's done. I can go back again with something new, something revised, something that's gonna allow me to be stronger next time, I guess.
Sure. Athambile, the question I have for you is, she's busy working on the translation of Ilifa into English, and yes, very exciting.
The publisher's here; it's all his fault.
And I'm interested in that process because I also kind of recently went through that. And so, when you engage with self-translation, like, how does it change your perspective of your poems, and like how does it make you feel? You know?
This is how I feel. So it kind of happened, not by mistake. That would be untrue. But I had hoped that somebody else would actually do it. And there was a friend whose name I won't mention because, shame. Maybe I shouldn't blast friends. But she might watch this.
Don't want to drag
But
her.
she knows who she is. And
She knows.
She knows. And she said, girl, I got you. Oh my gosh, I'm obsessed. Let's do it. Then I thought, okay, great. I'm off the hook. And all I have to do while I was reading it was just basically, like, I would paraphrase when I would come to do readings. Then Nick sends me... introduces us to someone who's doing a special issue on South African poetry. It's a literary journal in Australia, Portside Review. So we get this email. I'm like, oh, this is cool. So I respond. I'm like, this is cool. I'd like to be involved, but I write in Xhosa. He's like, great. Would you consider translating? I was like, And then I was like, you know what? Why not? Let's just give it a try. So I translated 3. And in fact, I translated a few more, and then I only ended up submitting 3. So those were the first kind of like into the world translation. And then the leftovers, I got in touch with Jennifer at JRB, and I was like, hey, I've got these poems. I didn't eventually put them there. Would you guys be keen? And then she's published a few more. I was like, oh, they live in the world. Now they're doing something different, and I could share them with people who are like, we love you, but we don't know this language, but now we can. And it was just another kind of iteration. And I had edited them. The original I had edited with Oscar Masinyana, and I'd sent them to him again. We've been working together for years. He's been amazing. He's like done some of my prose. That's how I met him, through Nick, actually, when they were doing Proof Rock. So it kind of just then ended up feeling like an ongoing conversation with Oscar. And then he gave me this advice of like, you're being too literal. Because I was so precious about the original, because I know it. And then I kind of had to like let it go. And that was scary. It was weird, and it was kind of like all the second guessing all over again. Am I over translating? Why am I translating all of those politics? Why me? And then I was going away for a month, and I told Nick I'm going away for a month, and Nick was like, how about you just translate everything? I was like, I am. Because you're here. It's always Nick's fault. I mean, how this even came about was him as well. He was like, oh, when you're ready. But it's always a good thing when someone opens up that door for you, even for yourself. And I think that's the thing of just like catching up to something that other people feel like is a possibility. And I had to really hold it in the most gentle way, even for myself. And now I think we have a draft that's almost, he thinks it's done. And then Prof. Pumla Dinogola also wrote a paper, and she translated a few. Oh. And just last week, when I was like finally putting together the last version for Nick, I compared her translations in the paper and mine, and we're going to have some chats.
Yeah.
And that was really cool. So it's already doing something, and I'm keen on those kinds of chats of like, why did you do it this way? And there are others where I just had to literally be like, I can't, like maybe I'll read it at the end, or if there's still time for a poem. Wakazulwa. Those who know, it's a hymn, and it's a whole sentence, and I just didn't know what to do with that sentence. And I see a hand at the back. So yeah, I mean that was the kind of thing of like I'm leaving this alone, and then anyway to be continued because you're going to see the introduction because I write about this whole process of like this was not my idea.
Nick. Okay, Siphokazi, what really struck me about the collection structurally is your decision to use Insomi as a kind of framing device, and we keep on returning to this tale of Ulinde, the named one, right? The unnamed one, the named one. And I'm very interested, like coming back to the topic of this talk about the kind of trauma of language and so on, and how you wrote that into this Insomi. Maybe you can just share a little bit about the plot of this Insomi and how it enabled you to kind of address these questions of trauma that we carry because of the languages we can and are not allowed to speak.
Okay. I'm trying to think what is going to be the best way to answer that question. So I spent a lot of time listening to recordings of Insomi. There's an archive of probably hundreds of Insomi, which I got through I don't even remember, but if it comes back to me, I think it's Mason or something. Madison University, which were recorded by Harold Shoaib of Umama Statu Zenani particularly, where he traveled in the 70s around Southern Africa for about 6 years and was recording Insomi, Ezlalini, all over the country, Eswatini, I think even up to parts of Mozambique, if I'm not mistaken, but there are so many of them. So if you have time, if you love, go in there because you hear this woman's voice from the 70s telling Insomi for like half an hour, up to an hour. She's telling them, where people are gathered. She's telling them at home. She's just, it was weeks of her voice in my ear. Because I realized I couldn't, as much as I grew up on Insomi and they're so important to me, I don't remember them as much or as well as I should. And she tells me this course. It's an incredible archive. And so my wrestling was actually around oral storytelling on the page. Because it was like, okay, there's a very specific way, especially for Kulinas Insomi, you know the rhythm of telling the story. There are things that we accept about the world of Insomi and so on. And what would it mean for me to take something that's so significantly an oral form and put it on the page, and then to do so in English? Very disrespectful of me. You know what I mean? Just, I have no respect. So, and then to, bring in Prospero. Do I say spoiler alert? The book has been out for a year.
Yeah, no, I think you can
I'm
spoil it.
only going to buy it straight after this.
So even using taking my own personal beef with Shakespeare and bringing it into the page and being like, okay, Mamelage, Prospero is going to be a cannibal.
Yes.
In this, because he's a colonial cannibal. I think Amy Césaire would be pretty yes.
You're like, I approve this message.
I approve. So it was just an opportunity for me to work out things in the fantastical world that were able to live in a very specific world that I was familiar with, that I am familiar with, and that many people would be familiar with, in a way that I didn't really care to do so in the world of the poetry, right? The more material world. So the magic, basically, of Insomi offered me something to figure out the experience of being a child in a violent schooling system, dealing with moving between worlds. So the fact that she actually has 3 names. One is her name is Waiting to be Named, and then it's Named One, and one who names herself. And with each, she has a different body. So she's in a human body, then she transforms into a vulture, and then she becomes water. So these things became, sort of more of an allegory, and it was just way more delicious, and allowed me to use the poetry as episodes in between this form of Inzomi. But also I wanted to co-opt poetry into the world of Inzomi in a way that, because chanting and singing are very significant in driving a plot. So if you can maybe chant something 3 times and then something will happen. There's a specific one about a bird that if you ask it for amasi, it will produce amasi, and then it tricks the kids and eventually escapes and they get beaten to death by their dad. It's very gruesome stuff. But there's no consequences. No one goes to jail, by the way, for murder. Like in Inzomi, it's just, okay, cool. They must have been bad. People do be dying all the time. But then also, it allows her to land up inside the stomach of Prospero. Yeah. And it's actually one of my favorite lines, like inside Prospero's stomach. And it's like, what? But it's normal for that world. So I think Inzomi allowed me to even think about structuring the poetry as belonging to these kind of refrains, the entire poems being refrains of particular themes, and then doing something for the plot itself and the constant interruption and my invitation to don't relax when you read this book, eh? Don't sit, don't chill. Just, you never know when it's coming. I've had so many people go, oh, I was reading this poem. I was like, oh my gosh, I'm in the world of, whoa. There was a cliffhanger.
Yeah.
I have a poetry collection that has cliffhangers, yes. So the sense of okay, who, and then what happened? Damn it, it's a poem. And then kind of, so there's a very embodied experience that for me, I would feel while listening to Inzomi, and particularly if your mom didn't finish it and you'd hear it the next day. You're like, oh my gosh. So yeah, I don't know if it answered anything, but.
No, it answered many things, even questions I didn't ask. But,
it's like, pick what you like in there.
Yeah, but I mean, it's just interesting what kind of thinking about this talk and how do I kind of link the 3 collections, right? Thinking about how, for instance, like fantasy in the language of Inzomi, the language of film. Today you were speaking about that kind of language of religion, right? And how that activated or enabled that kind of access for you. So that's also just interesting for me, these kind of formal decisions that we make and devices that we use to help us speak through our trauma and to kind of do it in fantastical, otherworldly ways. Yeah. Okay, amazing. I think we're going to open up the floor for questions. We're almost out of time, so let's do that. There's already an eager question. For everyone, for one.
No, I'll. Molweni.
Hi, Pula.
My question is based on the whole issue of circulation. On Wednesday, I was reading Unojaitawam to 11-year-olds. And then we were talking about the book and the beauty of stories, of written word. So when we talk about now, listening to you guys talking about trauma, is it possible that maybe the reason we have challenges with circulation is because of generational trauma, where parents passed on their issues with language to their children, and now we're passing that to the next generation? Because they asked me a question, because I keep on saying to them, you're going to be writers, you write your own book. So the question was, if we are going to write our own book, and you are saying, books that are written in Xhosa, no one buys them, no one writes. I mean even Mama Cindy Magona mentioned that no one buys Xhosa indigenous written books. So I guess we can leave it there. And the statistics is there, like 2% of books that are published formally. It's only 2% that's published in other languages. But the rest, 80% is 2%, 98% is published in English or Afrikaans. So do we leave it there, or is there a point in or should we just say, well, like there's no point in boiling water further, we should just, or do we find because the question, after reading, as I was going home, I kept on thinking, how did they do it? They didn't have people that were were reading before they started writing, before the movement of changing things from when they said, you know what, we've been defeated in other ways, let's go to a pen, let's take a pen and write. They wrote without thinking about circulation, without worrying about publishers saying there's no point in, we can't afford to publish books in indigenous languages. Or do we find a way to heal so that those 11-year-olds can write in isiXhosa in peace without the whispering that no one is going to buy it? Do we write so that books can be bought, or we write just because?
Sure. You want to do one by one?
I mean, whoever feels that they want to respond to that.
I'm just going to say one sentence. I think we write books so that books can continue to keep being written. So that I think, especially with, and I'm speaking within the context of the Afrikaans literary system, it's really small, and the readership is a really contained mess of people. So you really can't write with the idea that you are gonna make something cathartic happen. It's more that you write your history, that's your contribution to the history of your people, of your language, of your culture, and then you expand that space until a lot more people feel comfortable to enter that space and to expand upon it and to add their version, their experience with language, their experience with history, and their take on all of that. So I think it's more preservation, I'd say.
Yeah, I mean, this is an ongoing chat, and I'll try to keep it short because it's like historical, it's political, it's economic, it's class. You're asking so many questions, and I've met Pumla's 11-year-olds. What a vibe. And the thing that came to mind was Lovedale Press and newspapers. I see a lot of people nodding with what Lovedale Press, when I mentioned Lovedale Press, and the travesty of that and what it is, but there obviously have been ongoing conversations about Manas' cute tote bag from Victory of the Word, Lovedale Press. But that's a question of circulation, right? It's that how does a press that started more than 100 years ago just disappear in a post-1994 context? Why can we not maintain that? And that's something we have to answer to, because Lovedale Press published in isiXhosa, it published for schools, it published for churches, it published for, I think it also published in Sesotho and other languages. So there's this big elephant in the room about that question. And I mean, Carol's here, we've been writing children's books in 5 other languages. So we write in English, isiXhosa, Afrikaans, Sesotho, Setswana, isiZulu, Sesotho, isiZulu. And so there are New Africa Books publishers all across. So there's something happening. It's not enough when we know it's not enough. And I guess for your kids, it's right, first and foremost, full stop. You know, the fact that there's then this other world that you then want to be in conversation with, that's then can actually be quite creative. I don't think we necessarily all need to think about this form. We love this form, it's great. There are other forms that our writing can take. But yeah, I think it speaks to a broader context, and how maybe does writing with the idea of conversation and preservation and a political mandate, in a sense, impact what then you do with your writing. There is that thing where like there's that writing where you're like, I need people to read this, you know, because you're doing something important and political. And in that case, then you don't need a publisher. You know exactly what you're doing, and it will reach the people that it needs to read. I think we need to be asking a lot more of our radio stations, African language radio stations, and a book segment. I know Dumza does one on Umhlobo Wenene. As a book lover, I haven't caught it yet, so I also don't know what time it is. The SAFM used to have that beautiful, I mean, there was Nancy, but there was also the beautiful audio where you're kind of listening to a book being read over weeks on end, and it was on Sundays. More of that. They're podcasts now, so we've also just cut out the radio and we're creating our own things. So I'm really excited, and so I think for your kids, the world is still their oyster. I think it's just about getting more and more creative for ourselves for the preservation conversation.
I wonder, Siphokazi, if you don't want to end off the session for us with some inspirational words about how we can use language to keep telling our stories and to keep expanding our audiences, because we have reached the end of our time for this session.
Okay, I'll read a 2-minute poem.
Wonderful.
I hope it inspires. Mending patterns. One who names herself knows things about mother, things stitched within her with precision, along the seams turned inside out and darned from within. Mother licking the end of one thread into a point sharp enough to fit through an eye, grappling with fraying and reconciling threads imperfectly, but always on the end a knot as sure as a covenant. She would have to shred herself again to undo it. She imitates mother in her storytelling, how she persuades worlds woven of fabric to suggest the stitch needed for their healing. A listening that leads to unraveling, then speaking. Mother who enters the narrative without piercing it again. Pathways she makes with new thread through ancient disfiguring. This is how a village mends itself through its children. In the language of pencil, sketches, and scissors, polyglots soothing the stutter of cashmere and cotton, satin or silk along some unseen dreamscapes. Making kingdom of table and chair, brown paper patterns and chalk spread like maps or battle plans. Dividing fabric along its natural borders to tailor other ways of being into countries of shared imagination.
Thank you. Thank you so much, audience. Thank you so much, beautiful poets. These, and to me, yes. These collections are available downstairs. The authors are also going to be there for signed copies. And yes, enjoy the rest of the festival, guys. Thanks so much.